2010's Tron Legacy is remembered for a lot of things today. Its dazzling visuals, groundbreaking digital effects, and of course, the incredible Daft Punk soundtrack. But there's one part of Tron Legacy that I loved that I feel nobody talks about anymore. The toys. I loved Tron as a kid. The whole world just hooked me instantly. Something about the aesthetic of the grid, the glowing neon, the sleek black surfaces, the identity discs, the soundtrack. It wasn't like any other movie I'd seen at the time. It felt like truly stepping into my own dream of the future. I still remember the night I saw Tron Legacy in theaters. It was actually my very first IMAX movie, and I went with my dad, which made it special. I walked out of the theater convinced that Tron was going to be the next Star Wars, something our whole culture was going to be obsessed with, just like I was. The world, the characters, the light cycles, the whole aesthetic. To me, it felt bigger than life, like something that could define an era. And the very first thing I thought of walking out of the movie was, I need toys of this. So when I found out that Spinmaster had made a Tron Legacy toy line, I was ecstatic. But as the months went on, something strange seemed to happen. The toys disappeared and so did the hype. Tron Legacy just didn't take off the way Disney expected it to. And suddenly I felt like this little corner of my childhood just faded into obscurity. But yet for me, it never really went away. So let's talk about the toys themselves. Spin Master didn't just put out a couple figures and call it a day. This was actually a full-blown toy line with several different components. First, you had the basic action figures. The core of the line, these included characters like Sam, Flynn, Clue, Rinsler, and even some of the programs and guards from the movies. They were in a smaller scale, 3 and 3/4 inch, like Star Wars, which made them easy to collect. They also came with some really unique features that we'll get into later. Then there were all the vehicles, and if you've seen Tron Legacy, you know the vehicles are practically characters in themselves. The light cycles, the recognizer. Spin Master made toy versions that actually let you recreate these iconic sequences from the movie. There was also a Diecast line, which gave fans an affordable way to collect the vehicles in a metal version. These were sort of like Hot Wheels, but of the vehicles from the Tron world. Spin Master also released Deluxe figures, which were bigger, closer to 6-inch scale versions of the figures that included light-up features, and a few of the figures even included parts that displayed a version of the actor's face, which was really weird for the time. And finally, there was a roleplay component, allowing kids to play with the identity discs of the movie. The basic figures were really the core of Spin Master's toy line, and what made them special is that every figure came with a set of unique features that tied them directly into the world of the movie. First, each one came with their identity disc accessory, the most important object in the entire Tron world. These were small, removable pieces that the characters could hold, and as any kid who had these toys will remember, they were really easy to lose. If you still have one with the disc intact, you should consider yourself lucky. Second, every figure came with an identity disc themed display stand. These were color coded to match the character, so Rinsler and the guards got orange, Sam got white, and so on. For a movie that was all about light and color, this was a clever way to make the figures feel connected to the aesthetic of the film. And the real highlight of the figures was the light up feature. Spin Master added a button on the back of each figure that, when pressed, illuminated the neon lights running across their bodies. And Spin Master really nailed this effect. Even when the lights weren't turned on, the figures still looked pretty nice. However, when you did have them turned on, they popped with super eye-catching lights. For 2010, this was mind-blowing technology in toys for me. Now that I've done an overview of the features of each of the characters, let's go figure by figure and discuss my thoughts on each one. As a kid, I certainly didn't have the whole line. I only managed to get my hands on Sam, Rinsler, and the Clue Sentry, and a few of the vehicles. But that was enough to keep me obsessed, and I played with them constantly, and they really kept the world of Tron alive in my imagination. That and the Tron Uprising series, which released the year afterwards, made Tron one of the best parts of my childhood. I wish I had had more of the toys though, but those few figures felt special. Wave 1 of the basic figures included only 6 characters: Sam Flynn, Kevin Flynn, Clue, Rinsler, the Clue Sentry, and the Blackguard. Let's go one by one. First up, naturally, was Sam, who was one of my favorites. He came with his identity disc and a light cycle baton, which could be attached to his hip, which was a nice touch, although it had trouble staying on. But the one thing I had always wished was that the helmet was removable. It would have been so cool to swap between helmeted and unhelmeted looks, especially since he spends most of the movie without it on. Still, he was a strong anchor for the line, and definitely a must-have for kids. Next up, Kevin Flynn. Kevin was a bit of a mixed bag. Instead of his darker, more iconic outfit from later in the movie, Spinmaster chose his white lounge robes from the beginning. And while that's still kinda cool, it didn't quite capture the mystical sage kind of vibe he had going on. He still came with a disc and baton, and for what it was, it's not a bad figure. Just maybe not the Kevin everyone was hoping for, although we are getting one now from Hasbro. One massive win for this figure, though, is the light up feature. More than any of the other figures, Flynn's light really stands out and even illuminate a movie accurate pattern on his back. Next figure up is Rinsler. This was the real standout for me. He was my absolute favorite figure. His helmet design is so sleek, his theme in the movie is iconic, and of course the big twist reveal shocked me as a kid and made him unforgettable to me. The figure captured that menace perfectly, and he came with his two signature discs, and it made him feel so complete. He also came with two light cycle batons, which could also be attached to his hip, though I have lost them. Even today, this is probably my personal favorite figure from the line. Another big highlight from Wave 1 is Clue. Spinmaster elected to go with his light cycle outfit, which made sense. The image of Clue riding the cycle is so iconic and appears on some of the best posters of the movie. That said, I always wish we had gotten his trench coat look in addition, with a Jeff Bridges likeness for his unmasked face. But within the limitations they had for the line, I think they made the right call. He came with a disc, a baton, and even an orange light sword, similar to Korra, which he never actually used in the movie. Next up, we had two nice army builders. First was the Clue Sentry. He came with a disc and a light baton. He was perfect for army building in the movie. There are just endless ranks of these guys, so having a few on your shelf really helped make your Tron display feel alive. I had this guy as a kid, and I remember having Sam kill endless numbers of these guys. The final figure in Wave 1 was the Blackguard, who made for another awesome army builder, and I've somehow ended up with more of him than any of the other figures. He came with a disc and a baton, and he looked intimidating as a generic enforcer. My only real wish is that he had come with his flight gear from the end of line called Fight. That would have pushed him into an even cooler category. Still, for what we got, it's a solid figure and rounds out the wave nicely. Let's next jump to Wave 2, which is where things get interesting because distribution on this wave was shoddy at best. Wave 2 ended up being tiny, only including two characters, Cora and Jarvis, and even then, they were pretty hard to find. For the most part, they didn't even hit big box retailers like Target and Walmart in large numbers. Instead, they trickled out and mostly ended up at discount stores like Five Below and Ross, which made them feel almost like lost figures even back then. For me, Cora was the figure I desperately wanted as a kid, and the fact that she wasn't in Wave 1 was a huge miss. She's basically the heart of the movie alongside Sam, and not having her in my adventures as a kid always made it feel like it was incomplete. So when Wave 2 finally included her, I was thrilled. But of course, she was pretty hard to find. She did come with her iconic light sword and her identity disc, which made her a perfect figure except for one glaring problem. She always included her helmet. And let's be real, this was probably to help Spin Master release her, as they probably were scared boys wouldn't buy a girl toy, which feels really disappointing. However, they may have been right considering the toy sales of this line, which were already kind of poor. Still, at least she was a part of the line at all, and it gave collectors a chance to finally add her to their grid. Jarvis was the other figure included in Wave 2, and I've got to give Spin Master some credit here. This was a cool inclusion. Jarvis helps flesh out Clue's inner circle, and I've always loved when toy lines go beyond just the obvious leads and actually include some of the more niche supporting characters. He came with an identity disc and a little data pad, which was such a great accessory for him specifically. And then you get into the absolute disaster that was Castor. He was actually planned as a third figure for this wave, and he even appeared on the back of some of the boxes. But Spin Master just couldn't secure Michael Sheen's likeness rights in time, and as a result, almost all the manufactured Castor figures were destroyed before release. Only a few prototypes and samples escaped into the wild, and those have since become the ultimate grail of Tron toy collectors today. The most recent listing I found for one was for $1,500 on eBay. To this day, Castor is one of those figures I still dream of finding. He would have been such a fun addition to this line. It's a real shame he never officially made it to shelves. Spinmaster did comment and say they had planned on releasing Castor in a third wave, as they were able to secure the likeness rights for Michael Sheen. However, that wave never ended up coming out because the first wave just simply didn't sell well enough. The second wave ended up trickling out at discount retailers, and the film's box office just didn't warrant further evergreen products, which is a real shame. I, for one, would have loved to have gotten Castor, Clue in his trench coat, some of the different programs in the movie, Cora with her helmet off, and most obviously, as it would have been a simple repaint, a Rinsler painted in white to have a Tron based on his legacy appearance, even though he did have the helmet on. This also felt like the closest I had to an Uprising figure. I would have also loved to see the Uprising characters done in this same action figure style. Sadly, we never got any of that. Of course, you couldn't do a Tron toy line without vehicles. They're basically characters in the movie. Spinmaster really went all out here, releasing a total of 6 vehicles: 3 light cycles, 2 jets, and an ATV. The most important ones were, of course, the light cycles. Spinmaster made Sam Flynn's light cycle as well as Clue's. Clue's was a Walmart exclusive, which made it harder to track down, but both bikes looked fantastic. Each one featured LED parts that lit up, and each came with a molded figure locked into the driver's seats. The figures themselves didn't have much articulation, just minor movement, but as display pieces, they really nailed the iconic Tron Legacy light cycle look. The third bike was Kevin Flynn's light cycle. This one was unique. Instead of being based on the updated Legacy design, it was actually modeled after the original Tron light cycle. It even had an opening cockpit that allowed you to place a core-scaled figure inside. It was such a neat nod to the franchise's roots, and gave collectors a little bridge between the old and the new. And even though it only appeared for a little bit in the film, I love the white color scheme on this version of the bike, and it's my personal favorite look for it. There was also the Light Runner, Cora's four-wheeled ATV that she uses in the Outlands. In the movie, this vehicle had 2 forms. However, this vehicle only replicates the one. This thing was a blast, though, because it wasn't just sleek. It actually opened up to fit 2 figures inside. For kids recreating the movie, this was a must-have because it let you stage those Outland chase scenes with the heroes all packed in. It also had opening missile compartments, which was a really cool touch, and the lights on it were really stunning. For the aerial vehicles, there were 2 jets. The smaller one was a single-man fighter, based on the ones the Black Guards used in the final battle. Like the bikes, it had a Black Guard pilot permanently molded into the seat, which gave it a display-oriented vibe. I still really like it a lot, especially with the lights on it. But the crown jewel of the vehicle line was the 3-man light jet that Sam, Kevin, and Cora use at the end of the movie. This was a huge vehicle, and honestly it still impresses me today. I have trouble fitting it in the review station. It wasn't just oversized for the line, it was functional. You could actually fit all 3 figures inside at once. As a kid, this would have been mind-blowing, and even now owning it is incredible, because it's one of those rare vehicles that really captures the scope of the movie. It lights up, but unfortunately only when you press the missiles. I'm unfortunately missing the missiles and the back wings, but it's still really cool. I especially love how the back gunner station works, and how figures are able to clip in from the back part. Alongside the larger core-scale vehicles, Spinmaster also released a whole line of smaller diecast vehicles, and honestly, they were just as exciting in their own way. They were sold in 2 formats: single packs, kind of like Hot Wheels, or in 3 packs if you wanted to grab a set at once. What made the diecast line so cool is that it didn't repeat what the main toy line had already done. It actually expanded the vehicle roster. Of course, you got all the classics like Sam's Light Cycle, Clue's Light Cycle, Kevin's Retro Light Cycle, the Light Runner, and the Light Jets. But Spinmaster went further, giving us designs that didn't appear in the core toy line. There was a Recognizer, a Clue Sentry bike, Clue's massive command ship, and even a grid limo. That grid limo in particular is such a fun inclusion, because it's the kind of vehicle you would never expect the toy line to bother making, but it's such an iconic background design from the movie. I would have also really loved a tank, although we never got that. But the real highlight of the diecast line, though, was the recognizer carrying case. Although it was officially a part of the diecast line, it could really easily scale with your core line and fit it with them pretty well. It was designed for you to store your diecast vehicles in, and it even came with a small plastic light cycle to keep inside. But as a kid, I used mine for something completely different. It became my go-to carrying case for all the core figures. I loaded them up inside and took them around with me like my own portable grid. It wasn't the intended use, but that's the magic of toys. You make them your own. The diecast line might not have been the flashiest part of Spinmaster's legacy offerings, but it probably was the most complete. Between the singles, the 3-packs, and the expanded vehicle selection, it gave collectors and kids alike a way to really build out the world of Tron beyond just the core vehicles and bikes. Spin Master also released a line of deluxe figures that were closer to 7-inch scale, so they fit more in line with modern kind of Marvel Legends type figures. They released 4 figures total: Sam, Clue, Rinsler, and the Blackguard. Sam and Clue had the ability to speak in addition to just lighting up, and they also projected video of the actor's face, which projected a kind of cool effect but was also kind of strange, but was still pretty cutting edge for the time. Accessory-wise, all the figures came with their discs. Rinsler came with 2, of course. The Blackguard included his flight gear, which was a really awesome touch that I wish the basic figure included. They also included lots of not screen accurate weapons, like light swords and even light nunchucks for the figures to use, but that at least added some value. On top of the 7-inch line, Spin Master also pushed things further with a 12-inch version of Sam and Clue that towered over all the other figures, that still included all the same sort of accessories and features. Also released were a few roleplay toys. The basic discs were what I ended up getting. I only had the Sam Flynn disc. It was more of a frisbee that was shaped like a Tron disc. They also included a Rinsler disc in the lineup. They were really plasticky, and mine ended up getting all worn and torn very quickly, which was sad, but it still helped me feel like I was on the grid. There was also a deluxe line of discs. These could light up in really cool ways that I always enjoyed. For Wave 1 included just Kevin Flynn's disc. However, Wave 2, Spin Master upped the ante and included Sam and Rinsler's disc as well. They also planned a Clue disc, but that unfortunately never made it to shelves. I have managed to get my hand on the Rinsler disc, and it is really awesome. I hope to get the others, although I know Disney has recently made modern versions of all versions of these discs for their Light Cycle Run um, gift shop. I've so far managed to attain the Kevin Flynn disc, which is really cool. There were also a few miscellaneous types of toys that were released by Spin Master. They also released RC light cycles that were remote controlled bikes that were sort of like air hogs, if you've ever seen the ones that could go on the walls and on the ceiling, hypothetically. Ultimately, it was never really worked for me, but it was a cool idea, and it was a nice to see that they tied it in with Tron toys as well. There was also a full light cycle racetrack set, which I've acquired and is really cool. The standout of it ultimately is the 2 diecast light cycles that are included, but it is a really fun little Hot Wheels-esque racetrack. There's also a disc shooter game, which was fun and leaned into the classic arcade feel of the franchise. One of my personal favorites I really hope to get eventually is the Light Cycle Baton prop replica that actually launched out a version of the Light Cycle. This was a really fun sort of roleplay item. This was a Target exclusive though, and I never had it. Though one of my friends had it, and I was always jealous of it. There was also a line of smaller, like I want to say 1.5-inch scale figures, maybe 2-inch, that were 2-packs that were more cartoony, stylized versions of the characters and light cycles. They were definitely super charming, although I haven't acquired any yet. They had a few standouts, though, of very specific scenes which I really enjoy, like Sam Flynn being sucked into the Tron arcade game, Clue in his trench coat finally being paired with Caster, who's slightly easier to come across in this line than the basic lineup. They also included Gem, the siren from the Armory scene, which was a really nice character I also would have liked to see in the core lineup. Ultimately, this was a fun line that looks really neat, and I think it's one of the more forgotten aspects. However, I see a lot of these went on clearance. Even though the toys for Tron Legacy disappeared almost as fast as they appeared, the line still means a lot to me. They weren't just pieces of plastic and LED lights to me, they were a glowing piece of my childhood, and I feel bad that they're not talked about as much as they are. Even though I only had a few of the figures, I still felt like it was a great representation of the film, and had I had more figures in the line, I'm sure it only would have made things even greater. I really wish they had continued with figures from Uprising and whatever else would have come next for the Tron franchise. So, whether you're a longtime Tron fan, a toy collector, or someone just curious about a piece of forgotten pop culture, I hope this deep dive helped shine a light back on a toy line that deserves it. If you had any of these toys growing up, or if you're hunting them now, I'd love to hear about your journey in the comments. Thanks so much for watching my very first YouTube video. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Tron Legacy toy line, please leave a like, maybe subscribe for future content, because I have a lot more of toy history and forgotten lines I'd love to cover. Until next time, end of line.